all the panelists here, I would say, represent global, at least regional organizations. And many of our audiences will be interested to work with you in different ways, whether it's the analytics or it's programs. I'm not sure if you said, Mildred, if you mentioned, but your program aims to reach 100 million people. So maybe a question here, and we all know Safaricom and FAO. How do you select your partners? What are the most critical things? What are the things you've been looking at in selecting partners that the audience should think about if they want to partner with you? I'll start here with you, Carolyn.
I think, thanks. In any partnership, what is really important is trust. And that takes some time to build up, and it's also not that easy, especially if you don't know each other that well, have quite different backgrounds. That takes time. And what I always find important is to be very clear on your expectations and understand how the other person can benefit, and also be open on how you benefit from it. Then you can come to kind of something which is mutually beneficial. And also agree on a clear division of responsibility. So for me, that is always something that is important. I also, and this is not really an answer to your question, but I sometimes feel that we are sometimes incentivized more to compete than to collaborate, and so this is, I think, something where. This is also something to be aware of, like how big is the cake really? What is the problem we are trying to solve? And let's do it together. And I very much liked what my co-panelist from FAO was saying, that you need to do it together. And there's this famous African saying, which I think everyone has heard once by now, but if you want to go quick, go alone. But if you want to go far, you will have to go together. So to get back to your question, how we select partners, I think for us this trust is important. There should be a concrete opportunity based on which you can build. And personally, I also then like to really start small, and then as you get to know each other, you can expand on that partnership. But it's not necessary to always go for the big goal right away.
Hannah, you can take it on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about trust. Another thing that, as we're thinking about our partners, is really that relationship with beneficiaries, how close they are to the ground. More and more, of course, there's different partners for different objectives, like we were just talking about, but we really are emphasizing and prioritizing the importance of local partners who know the context, partners who have the relationships on the ground, who really know the farmers, because one thing that we know is extremely important for all of our work is to make sure that the solutions are contextually relevant, that they make sense to farmers, and really the people that are best suited to do that are those that are on the ground closest to working with farmers.
I'll jump to Mildred, since I put her on a spot with 100 million farmers, and then we'll come back.
Yes, so we do have a goal to reach 100 million farmers, which was started in 2019 till 2030. And of that part, bringing it closer home, Africa, for us, the target is about 25 million, which is a quarter of that number. Now, reaching smallholder farmers, I think, was the first goal in this partnership. We said, how do we ensure that we're reaching these number of farmers at scale? We understood first that we couldn't do it alone, so there was a need for partnerships. We understood also what were the competencies that were needed to be able to reach these farmers. We are an input provider, so there's a technical knowledge that we can bring, whether we're looking at it as seeds or even in just cropping system management as a whole. But who else do we need around the table? We realized that an ecosystem approach was needed. We knew that we don't have digital capabilities, neither do we have the right platforms, then partners perhaps like Safaricom through DigiFarm can bring that added advantage. Or we look at partners like Mercyco, even through the Bayer Foundation. So we have two different work streams where we do partnerships, whether directly with Bayer as a company, but with also through our Bayer Foundation. And I wanted to highlight a little bit on that. On the Bayer Foundation's part, the foundation's critical role, primary role, is really to catalyze science and social innovation. So any social innovation that has a potential for scale, where we see it can have a direct effect on food security, on health, and the environment, that already is 50% a criteria for partnerships. I think each and every member sitting on this platform today, we have a touch point and partnerships with that we're working with at a local, regional, continental level in terms of Africa or even outside the continent. So the first thing is what we want to achieve and who are the competencies or who are the organizations in this case that would help us to achieve those goals. So for smallholder farmers, we're still looking, we're still open, and we're still looking to scale. Yeah. Thank you.
Hamisi? Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, I will talk about three things. Number one, if we must look at complementarity. How is the partnership complementing, or how does the partners complement one another? For example, as I said earlier, you'll find that the government, the public sector, may have an enabling policy or create an enabling policy environment, or create that environment to be able to serve citizens or for service delivery. But one, you find that the government will lack, for example, capacity. So they need technical assistance, and they need also financial assistance. So this will call for them to look for partners that can provide technical assistance and financial assistance. So you see that complementarity coming very in, and you will find that the private sector or the organizations like the United Nations have a goal to serve citizens. But they cannot do it in a vacuum. They need some environment created for them. And that you find that the government has to create that so that they can achieve their, like look at the SDG goal number 2, zero hunger. You are not able to achieve that if the environment is not created for you to achieve that. So we see that complementarity coming in very well. We find that the government sometimes don't have the right skills. So therefore, they need partner that will provide that right skill. The other thing I would want to say is basically value proposition or unique offerings. What is the unique offering that the partners bring on table? What is it that this partner can do very well, or only this partner can do, or only certain partners can do very well? For example, you find that private sector, particularly for profit, may not be interested in creating services where there's no profit or where there's no sustainability. But if the government come in and say, okay, we will create some basic infrastructure, which are one-off, then the private sector can now leverage on that infrastructure to offer services at profit, but at least are subsidized as opposed to when they were to build the infrastructure themselves, whether digital infrastructure, whatever type of infrastructure. So you see, again, the unique value proposition or unique offering comes in as a very critical feature to consider, which creates partnership. The last thing I'll talk about is the gaps. The truth is, you believe it or not, both private sector or public sector or different institutions, each of them have a gap. I don't think there's any institution in the world that do not have a gap. You'll find there's something that you lack. And you can't be everything or you can't do everything. Even geniuses only did one thing. Newton's only found one thing. They never did everything. So if geniuses never did everything, then definitely there's a gap. So it's good also to identify where are the gaps, and therefore who is this other person or this other institution that can fill that gap. And then you find that those partnerships become long-lasting, impactful, and at least reaching 100 million farmer look like a dream, but if you follow those 3 principles, then can be done in 6 months.
Stanley, you want to?
Yeah, I think in Safaricom, and I think I might have some colleagues here who are from DG Farm. We work with partners who we believe over time are going to deliver. So we create a platform, we orchestrate, we bring to the table all the different players in different, whether it's the inputs, whether it's the financing, whether it's services, whether it's the off-takers. We bring it to the table and say, therefore the farmer then has the options and has the ability to choose on how to go. So from that, our perspective, and I think as we go along and that platform becomes bigger and bigger, it will be refined, because then we'll know who are good, who are not good, who are reliable, what are we getting from that perspective. So Safaricom in this case is much more of a, we provide the platform, the marketplace basically to provide all these services. And therefore, over time, it's about really delivery, which will be helped to sustain and make sure that we keep the right partners in different areas which the farmer then can choose from.
Thanks. And just to bring it back to the audience, so one of the things, I've heard the issue of trust, which seems to be like, trust can mean a lot of things, but an interesting one. I think that needs a bit more unpacking. But complementarian vis-a-vis also competitiveness. And I think, as Stanley has said at the end, success. How do we bring success? So maybe bringing it back to you and sort of posing it, sort of how we think about going forward. Either what is your organization, or what do you think needs to be done in order to narrow this gap, be it in trust, be it in how institutions potentially are competing, rather than solving a common problem, they complicate things. How do we find the complementary attributes of each other? And how do we ensure success? So what is your organization doing on that, and that part others can think about, so that you are able to mobilize more partnerships? I see, Mildred, you're ready to answer, so start there.
Yes, I think for me, the idea really behind the pie, what we think internally is that let's make the pie bigger. As opposed to who shares what portion of the pie, how can we ensure that we're making this pie bigger with the focus of solving the problems that smallholder farmers have? Let's always remember that 80% of the food we eat will come from smallholder farmers. And smallholder farmers are still struggling today after so many interventions from different organizations working in silos, some not. I think we've come to a waterhole moment where we're saying, without partnerships, we can't do it. Even the UN organizations are recognizing today that we need government, we need both public and private sector investment into solving the challenges that smallholder farmers will continue to have in Africa. Whether it's in bringing standardization, whether it's in traceability and access to international markets, because for us as a company, the conversations around smallholder farmers must not be a subsistence conversation. That there is productivity. The contribution of agriculture to Africa's GDP can be quadrupled if we make the right investments in the right spaces, hence the right competences, hence the right partnerships. If we can be deliberate about this, if we can be deliberate about ensuring that the billions of dollars that our government earmark for importation of food can be used for other investments, infrastructure, then I think we can build the right partnerships to solve the right problems.
Yes, Stanley. You raised some very interesting points, but yes, Stanley, let's go.
Yeah, I'll go back to this part about scaling up. And I'll say it again, I'm a strong believer in that. By and large, the farmer we are talking about has solved, to a less extent and to a small extent, some of the problems we are talking about in different areas as best as they can. So if you, again, when I spoke to my grandmother in Githunguri, and she tells me about how they are able to get feed for their animals, how they are able to get almost like an advance when they need to pay their school fees, how everything then is cleaned up and through this system called Githunguri Cooperative Farmers. And it's just one of our user cases which are all there. The question is how we change that and to, and I know in Kenya it's a difficult proposition, to amaze kind of a conversation in Kenya, and what that will do to livelihoods and to income, to rural incomes. I really, really think that is the one thing of, we don't, I think Boniface talks about geniuses and what, we don't have to reinvent a lot of these things. When I was in one of those market things, I went to Kinangop, and I realized that actually farmers have figured out a way of, you know what, I don't have a full load, but they have a kind of an Uber system for logistics. There's a truck, I put in mine, other people put in theirs, and so on and so forth. So here we could be talking about, you know what, let's get an Uber. They already have it. The question is, how do you scale it? How do you put structures around it? And I believe strongly, if we are able to get to that level using companies like Safaricom and others, and platforms which are open, then it will really, really be able to unlock a lot of things.
Okay, I'll answer the question. You asked complementarity versus competitiveness.
Yes.
Today, even now, every home, there's somebody cooking food for supper. But what I can tell you that all those foods are tasting differently. There's no food that you'll find is tasting the same. But every home, there's somebody who's cooking. So I look at it that competitiveness is actually part of complementarity. It's until you taste the other mother's food, somebody's mother's food, you know that your mother's food is better or not. So you'll find that what each person could be doing the same thing, but they will be doing it differently. They will not be exactly doing the same. So there's some still element of complementarity. In 2016, I started looking at how climate information services are being provided in this country and most part of the global. And I found that most of those organizations, those who are providing climate information, they were not giving chance and amount. They were just giving general probability likely. So I asked myself, how likely is likely? And I started thinking of an innovation that could help us give chance and amount. And I was able to crack that, and so that we can give chance that it will rain and the amount you're likely to get. Just using the same data set that the same other companies were using. Today, I see nearly most people that are giving weather forecast are giving chance and amount. And I'm glad that I thought about that. And when now they're giving chance and amount, for me, I'm thinking, after I tell the farmer, and I've been started thinking about that, okay, I'll tell the farmer how much rain the farmer is going to get. What does he do with that information? I'm just being an alarmist. So I've told it's going to rain, so what? I'm just going to get 20%, 50 millimeters, so what? And now, how can we get corresponding agronomic advisories that with this amount of rainfall, undertake the following practices? And that moves to now a big debate about climate weather modeling. And a lot of people now doing climate weather modeling. So the question is, who is cooking what, and what should I be cooking next? So you still find this complementarity in competitiveness, because monopoly kills innovation. Lack of competitiveness kills innovation. So there's competitiveness in complementarity. So if you look at that, I'm not being scientific, but if you look at either complementarity in competitiveness or competitiveness in complementarity, because one will stimulate the other. We'll kill innovation if we avoid competitiveness. But we must look at competitiveness with the lens of complementarity, because not all foods taste the same.
Very well noted. Yes. You also mentioned the issue of trust, so please.
Well, I actually wanted to build on what Boniface just said.
Yeah.
In the, a term that we use a lot is comparative advantage, which I think straddles the two that you were just talking about between, the complementarity and competitiveness, and being very clear on the comparative advantage that each organization brings. I think that helps with figuring out, how do we grow the pie? How do we work together to leverage each of our skills, our comparative advantage from where we come from what we offer, and having a very clear vision, or just a clear story about what that is, and not allowing that to really be shaped by who you're talking to. I think that can be really challenging sometimes, especially for many of the entrepreneurs in the room, right? When you're pitching to different investors and maybe asking for something different, it's easy to kind of shift who you are, but that DNA of an organization, and being really clear on what it is that you bring to the table really lays the foundation to build partnerships in order for us to build that pie.
Yes, very interesting debate. I agree, competition is important to spur innovation. But I also sometimes wonder on what are we competing on? This morning we launched the FarmFit Insights Hub. There are many people who have asked, is this for free? So people almost expect that we are selling that data, whilst in the end we are an NGO. This has been financed by public money, thanks also to BMGF, but and also taxpayers' money from different governments. And I think that is where I kind of sometimes struggle a bit with the competition. And that is where I'm getting worried when I see a lot of duplication and information not being shared openly. And even for companies, I sometimes wonder, should everyone build up their own database with farm information? That same farmer is selling his beans to one company, and his maize to another company, his tea to another one. And these three companies have different data on that same farmer. It doesn't help him to get access to finance, because all the information is scattered. All the three companies invest in their own farm management information system, also don't get the holistic perspective. And that is where I think kind of working together, which is probably something around building this ecosystem. There's certain things on which you want to compete, and there's certain things on which you don't want to compete. Let those companies compete on giving those farmers decent services, decent access to market, good quality inputs, access to finance. Let them compete on that, but not on trying to extract data from all these same farmers, and in the end expecting the farmers to pay for that. Yeah, and I think for me that ecosystem building, doing that together, for me that is really crucial, and yeah, I really encourage partnerships in that field.
Thank you. So what I've heard from the many of you, harmonization. So is it, as I think as Amisi said, everyone's cooking dinner, but their food will be different. Complementary vis-a-vis competition, but I think some level of harmonization of the different efforts, synergies, even though we do compete, or even though we have different programs targeting sometimes the same outcomes or with the same group of farmers or actors, synergies can still be realized. Having the larger picture in mind of, whether it's the smallholder farmers and how we, we assist them. And overall, the impact. The question is, is there are the pieces, what is it? The whole larger than the sum of the pieces, or are the sum of the pieces not even larger than the whole? And I think that's a good question particularly for the development partners. With so many initiatives, is it really adding up or is it not? So, so I think those are things we can take. And I think even for Mercy Corps, I think with having so many partners, I think Mercy Corps is a very good example of an organization that has many partners who potentially compete outside of this particular room, but you are able to synergize and find some positive programs that are hopefully not duplicating. In my experience, I don't think it's a duplication, particularly what this program does. So as closing remarks from each of you, so when we're now focusing on harmonization, synergies, and this larger impact, what would your recommendations be to the audience in the room or specifically to Mercy Corps as a way forward on partnerships? I can start. Who would like to start? We can stand there. I see you're going for the mic. Safaricom, yes. Going.
I think on partnerships, I think a lot has been said. So there is really very little I can add. The most important thing is, my view is to remember the farmer at the end of it all. And that in effect, what we want is the farmer to get incomes, to be able to educate their kids, to give them a better livelihood than they possibly had themselves. If we keep that focus, I believe there's a lot which we can do if that's a common goal, then there's a lot in terms of partnerships we can do. The part which is there is, it's always interesting listening to the conversations. They said, there's so many people who want to do good. How come it's not translating to this? Because if you talk to the government, they'll say, we want to help the rural livelihoods in terms of increasing. If you listen to Bayer and the others, they say that we also want to make sure that we actually are helping. Safaricom, the same. The international organization, the same. There is a little bit of possibly a reflection for all of us to just step back and start thinking. Clearly, there are partnerships which are working together well. The question is, how do we all come together and, so to say, bring back back to my theme about scaling, to bring those solutions together. Because otherwise, we are all talking, we'll go to another conference and we'll talk about the same things, and the solutions which are already there are not being implemented in a big enough scale. And that's one of the reasons, obviously, for me, why I think organizations like Mercy Corps or Safaricom need to work together towards that goal.
Okay. I'll just close by saying three things. When we think about partnership, let's think about how can the partnership lead us to scale. Because as we talk now, as many as we are here, not all farmers are being reached by our services. So how can partnership help us reach scale? Number two, how can partnership let us have inclusivity? Because technology can also be exclusive in terms of gender, in terms of marginalization. So how can partnership help us be inclusive? And lastly, or second last, is how can partners help us to reach sustainability? Because without sustainability, all our efforts will actually not, will last for a short time. And lastly, how can partners help us reach impact? Because at the end of the day, all we need is impact. So those are my way forward.
Hannah?
Thank you. Well, my recommendation as we're thinking about closing is if we could bring the same level of energy around innovation to our products and services, that level of innovation to our partnerships, I think then we can really grow. There are new ways of working together. There are, really innovative, revenue sharing models, ways of collaborating that we're probably only scratching the surface on. And so really to make it that breakthrough into the next step, we really need to think about innovations in the way that we partner and innovations in the way that we work together. And there was something that I heard yesterday around the government providing the fertile soil for the ag solutions to grow. And I love that metaphor because if you think about the systems, right, farming, it's really around all of these things coming together. The foundations, the inputs, which are kind of the ideas, the funding, the enabling environment. And so really, I think that's the symbiotic relationship that we can keep in our minds, is like, how do we work together? How do we grow together? And what new innovations do we need to bring into this ecosystem and these partnerships?
Yeah, thank you. And then let me close off with 3 things. First of all, I think it is good to stop duplication, learn from each other, especially in data. I think we're collecting a lot of data. Much less is analyzed. Much less is then subsequently translated into a use case, and even less is then disseminated. I think that is really important, especially because I see a lot of opportunities on this data that we are collecting with some of those new innovations like artificial intelligence that we started off with today. And then the second, or maybe the last point actually, is what was said before, is let's use partnerships to scale. And indeed, let's use some of those new revenue generation models to make that work. That's all. Thanks.
You. Mildred?
Yes, and for me, I think the conversation around harmonization becomes key. We are one organization that is investing in a lot of social innovations, and we want to see this space, especially with young people, the magnitude and the breadth in which they're able to think innovatively to bring solutions. However, I think it's also key that companies like Bayer or even development partners really begin to look at organizations that have tried and tested, that have capacity for scale and scale across the region. That we find solutions that are specific, let's say, to one county in Kenya is good, but how do we ensure that we're scaling to COMESA, that we're going beyond, the whole of sub-Saharan Africa? I think organizations or tools that have the capacity to go across the borders will be the one who will make the most impact. And I think as investors or as partners, we should really prioritize the capacity for scale in those regards. Let's harmonize. Data is out there. It depends on where you're looking for. There are so many platforms that have in-depth data about smallholder farmers, their needs and what is happening, their buying capacity, their credit scores. How do we ensure that we're bringing those to fore and really allowing everybody to access some of this information, especially also for governments, that will help in decision making? A lot exists already. How can we scale it? How can we ramp it up? How can we really make it count for smallholder farmers, for for-profit organization? I think sometimes we even drum it bigger than a lot of people, because we do understand that once you bring in the knowledge and the capacity into the hands of smallholder farmers, African farmers don't want handouts. They want to earn with dignity. Let's create the right environment for that.
Thank you very much. So some keywords to close off what you've all have said. Impact, particularly on the smallholder farmer, and let's keep that in mind as we think about forging partnerships with each other or amongst the ecosystem, and this, even with public and private. Different. I like the different one. The energy from, we see that in innovation should come to partnerships as well. I'm not talking just about the partnership agreement, but just in general, how we think of partnerships and how they should work. Perhaps we need to think about that more. But obviously, the challenges that exist require us to think differently, particularly in the aspect of climate change, and productivity of the smallholder farmers will increasingly be challenged by climate change. Reducing duplication. I think this duplication, this is a space that has been, it's almost like it was a trial and data, innovations and collections. It's still relatively new, but we're getting to a point perhaps it's too much, as you say, and it's probably too duplicated, and it's probably more noise than curation insights. How do we go from the noise to more insights so that we're actually building? So we have to think about that, and the likes of Mercycorps can assist. And lastly, and which I think is key, that was said by everyone, is scale. So partnerships should not be for the sake of partnerships, partnerships for scale. I think at the beginning I said some of the constraints, the smallholder wants more income, wants more resilience, wants dignity, and wants to be able to survive within that. And also the service providers, they want efficiency, they want profitability, they want sustainability. So how do we think about all that and create skills? So those are sort of the key words as we think about developing partnership. A round of applause for the panelists here. I think they were quite insightful. Yes, so I think that finishes it off, because I think one of the big themes was about partnership, and we'll now hand it over to Sieka for some concluding remarks. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. I can see by the scarce seats that collaboration is happening plentifully outside, and many of you are hoping to be part of that collaboration. So I don't think I'll take much of your time. We wanted to do some of the wrap-up points for the whole 2 days and today, but I think it's better that you catch Jasper at the cocktail, and he can share with you what are some of those insights that he's gotten. This has been a great conversation. Once again, I want to thank the panelists for those great contributions and those great closing remarks. What can I add? What can I say? I think I came clearly with a clear idea that collaboration is great, but I don't have a clear idea about how to make this great collaboration work. I think there's still more questions around how we collaborate, Perspectives have been brought in about comparative advantage, competition, duplication, trust. I think we still have a longer journey to walk around this theme of collaboration, and we really, really need to think about it because systems don't work without collaboration. Systems don't work without symbiotic relationships. So we really need to be concerned about it and see how we can make it work, especially us amongst actors in the same verticals and actors across different verticals. How do we put our resources together to make things work? I know they've said that AgriFin has done a good job, and I think there are many other organizations that do this as well, but we're just scratching the surface. There's a lot more that can be done to make sure that the lives that we are trying to touch are really touched and improved. Oftentimes, and it's not that I do this all the time, but I occasionally think about some of the big things that went bust. You all know about Nokia phones. I think most of you would know about Nokia. Yeah, that was a great platform, a great product that scaled to great numbers. It was built, it was too big to break, but it broke. It went out of business. I was also part of the BlackBerry revolution. I sold BlackBerry at Celtel for a long time. And we believed that that was the latest and best technology, There was no technology that could actually defeat it. But it went bust, So things change. Things in the markets change constantly. And we need to think, if we do not do the right things, we don't want the smallholder farmers to go bust, because that will affect a lot of things. And so we really need to be quite considerate about the approaches we're taking to make their lives better, the approaches we're taking to ensure that the organizations that support them, that provide services, are able to do this in the right way, are able to scale, or actually be more impactful if they are focused on niche markets. So I urge each and every one of you to take that message home, that there's no time to waste. There are a lot of factors and forces that are working against the small-scale producer. Yeah? Be it climate change, be it the global economy, be it conflicts, all these topics that have been talked about throughout these last 2 days. We need to take this seriously. For us in the development world, there's no choice. I mean, otherwise, what are we here for? What were we funded for? What were we built and founded for? Yeah? For the private sector that is interested in making a living out of supporting the small-scale producers, if we don't take this issue seriously, you won't have that market you're looking at. Now, I know the Safaricoms, the banks have other markets and probably have not been looking at this market. But for many of you, and many of you innovators, this is the market where you believed you'd build your dream organization. So we all really need to continue to sit down, put our minds together, and really think about how we make collaboration work and how we ensure that we are improving the lives of small-scale producers across the global south. So I want to thank everyone for attending, and I think a big round of applause to the most important people of the last 2 days, which have been all of you. So can you give yourselves a round of applause? I also want to thank all the partners and all the companies that exhibited in the marketplace. I think they all did a great job. A lot of this innovation, some of them struggled to actually come here. They actually called, once we put up the call for allowing companies to present their wares, many companies showed up. We had to select a few, some were left out of it. So we really thank those ones that were able to come here. And we're also enthused by the interest that they have in showing their solutions. I'd also like to thank all the content partners. We did not do this ALE alone. We worked quite closely with a number of content partners. I mentioned them on the first day. We worked closely with IDH, SIGUP, World Bank, IFAD, FAO, am I missing anyone else? Spark. Quite a number of organizations came together to bring this ALE. Usually when we do the ALEs, we direct a lot of the conversation. We direct a lot of the partnerships, a lot of the panelists. But this time around, our partners came together and said, okay, we're going to work with you. We're going to bring different voices on stage. So I'd really like to thank them for all this work, because that's what has made this a great ALE. And then last but not least, I would like to thank the team that put this together, that worked tirelessly. So can I have any of the AgriFin team members here? I know some are networking outside. Let's give them a big round of applause. I'll spare you with all the names. There are a couple here, there are a couple outside, but we're all going to be at the cocktail right now, so it's not over. There's still a chance to network and get to know each other. So please, I oblige you all, join us. I think it's at the Palm Garden or the Pavilion, close that area. Does anyone know exactly? Palm? Pavilion. So it's going to be at the Pavilion. So we'll have some drinks and just share our stories, and we continue this conversation around collaboration. And last but not least, please give us feedback. The only way we get better, the only way we learn is if we understand what your experiences were. As I sat here for the whole afternoon session, I obviously saw that, okay, we've kept people sitting for too long. That's feedback, that's immediate feedback. But please share your own personal, individualized feedback so that the next session that we have like this will be a lot more impactful and will be a lot more considerate of your different needs. Thank you all for coming, and looking forward to the next time we have a conversation. Asante.